Okay, everybody, welcome to your Transaction of the Year Awards program for CCIM. 2017 was a great year for all of us, I hope. The year is closing out strong. We have strong leadership who goes and gets deals done and twists arms. And we have strong membership that supports each other and also gets deals done. One of the things that I value most about our organization is how much we collaborate and how much we have each other's backs and how much we educate each other and how open we are in a commercial real estate world that is closed off. We're not like that. We're people who do greater things by working with greater people and get better every day. From underwriting, which is what our education is all about, to deal structuring, which is what Matthew Conser and Bob Nelson and Brett McLean and Pat Keskard all do. These are just examples. They submitted Transaction of the Year applications, and I was blown away. I think everybody on all of the committees that reviewed these things was blown away. Now, I just want to say thank you to everybody who comes on a routine basis and contributes to the group and makes us what we are, because we do a lot of business, we refer to each other, we make our clients wealthier, safer, and we provide a really important service in the investment community. So I want to say thank you for everybody for contributing to our wonderful chapter. We have great leadership. Andy Edmonds is, I think the word for her is savage. Get out of her way. She keeps our board in check. And that is no easy job on top of running an amazing business and having a wonderful family. So Andy, thank you. Okay, I can talk too long. I don't want to talk too much. We have just a wonderful group of presenters today. I'm really excited to hear from each and everybody who submitted slides. I'm excited to go over these transactions because we can learn a lot from them. So with that, I don't know if Kevin Reed's in here. Kevin?
Right here.
There he is. Let's go, Kevin Reed. He's going to talk about our power partners here.
Thank you, Carson. Kevin Reed, CCIM, last year's president. This is probably the coolest job of all, and that's the opportunity to thank our power partners, who without them, this chapter would not be what it is today. We made a conscious effort at the beginning of this year to make sure that we showed our power partners our appreciation by getting them more actively involved with us professionally, only to find out that we all benefited tremendously from their contribution, both professionally and personally. And so we're going to make even a stronger effort in 2018 to make sure that we tap those resources, that wealth of knowledge and that experience that'll help us grow our business. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to our power partners and have those individuals stand up so that we can acknowledge you. Ken Leatherman with Alliance Insurance. Andrew Ikeda with AM Capital Source. Brad Moore with Amerititle. Darcy Norby with Banner Bank. Jonathan Frizzell with Bedford Capital. Or Bedford Cost Segregation. Stand up, keep standing, please, Jonathan. We're gonna clap for you. Cliff Hockley with Bluestone and Hockley. CB Commercial Realty, Jack Chu. Steve Gemmel with Earthquake Tech. Timothy Fitzpatrick with Fitzpatrick Painting and Construction. David Moore with Equity Advantage. James Brown with James Brown and Associates. Jim Mall with Mall Foster, or Seth, please, would you stand up, please? Isaac Grant with Northwest Community Credit Union. Connie Rathbone with Rathbone, Barton, and Olson. Jeff Silverman with Silverman Studios. James Falvey with Stoller Family Estates. Chris Nordick with Summit Facility Services, Restoration and Emergency Response. Cheryl Summers with Tycor Title. Jessica Beck with Wells Fargo SBA Lending. And Tom Pedd with William Kastner. Can I have a round of applause for all these power partners? Again, we can't thank you enough for your contributions to our chapter, and we look forward to 2018. It's even going to be a better year, so thank you.
Sorry, that went a lot faster than I thought it was going to. Just after Carson's nice words, not really that prepared. And loud. Okay. So I'm up here to talk a little bit about what is a CCIM. On its golden anniversary, the CCIM designation remains the only credential at the leading edge of investment strategy, financial analysis, and negotiation. So what is a CCIM? A certified commercial investment member is a recognized expert in the commercial and investment real estate industry. And I can't see what slide I'm on, so I'm hoping that's right. The CCIM designation is earned after successfully completing a process that ensures CCIMs are proficient not only in theory, but also in practice. CCIMs have completed a designation curriculum that covers essential CCIM skill sets, including ethics, interest-based negotiations, financial analysis, market analysis, user decision analysis, and investment analysis for commercial investment real estate. CCIMs have completed a portfolio demonstrating their depth of their commercial real estate experience. Finally, they have demonstrated their proficiency in the CCIM skill sets by successfully completing a comprehensive examination. Only then is a designation candidate awarded the coveted CCIM pin, joining the ranks of highly skilled commercial and investment real estate experts. Okay, I'll click 2 here. Okay, good. The story of CCIM is the story of a half century when the commercial real estate industry emerged from the era of private ownership, wildcatter developers, to become a global, public, professionalized industry with increasingly complex ownership and financial structures. Regional shopping centers and chain hotels were springing up across the country. Real estate syndications were being replaced by REITs as the premier public ownership structure for commercial real estate. The interstate highway system led to the creation of new suburban communities. Commercial real estate was about to become more complex. CCIM took shape at a time of revolutionary change. In the 70s, we saw skyscrapers, planned communities, and stagflation. In the 80s, S&Ls, junk bonds, and soaring vacancies. The 90s, the RTCs, CMBS, and the growth of the public CRE data. In the 2000s, soaring prices, crowdfunding, and of course, the Great Recession. Throughout, CCIM has been a force and a champion of careful financial, market, and investment analysis and fiduciary-level professionalism in all phases of the commercial real estate transaction. So today, we see institutions and entrepreneurial real estate firms looking for increasingly sophisticated analytical skills to be competitive. Secondary and tertiary markets are soaring, but buyers lack the bandwidth and experience to analyze every acquisition target in a market glutted with product. Risk mitigation, pricing, and cycle assurance have become critical to the investment community. This is a market primed for the expertise of a CCIM. CCIM provides real-world education. It's actionable education covering timely topics such as crowdfunding, taxation, 1031 exchange, negotiations, corporate representations, and valuations. In 2016, the CCIM Institute added several new courses covering topics such as development, profit splits, loan amortization, industrial distribution, leasing accounting standards, and IRR calculations. All topics that are so timely for today and are of such value to our clients. Whether locally, regionally, nationally, or even globally, the power of CCIM Network has been proven. Those who engage, contribute, collaborate, receive the greatest benefit from the relationship that often starts during a class or a chapter meeting or even happy hour. But these then deepen and strengthen over time as we come to count on the expertise and professionalism that we know we will receive from our fellow CCIMs, designees, candidates, and those affiliated with the CCIM chapter. CCIM also strives to bring technology. Site to Do Business provides the CCIM Institute members with first-tier digital toolkit for uses like demographics, psychographics, advanced mapping, business lists, and investment analysis. I encourage you all to know your benefits. CCIM recently, maybe in the last 12 months or so, rolled out a new website. It's much easier to navigate, and the benefits are clearly stated under the members-only section. So if you're a member of the Institute, take a few minutes to go there. There's some really excellent tuition discounts. There's Deal Share, which is a way to make sure that your property or your need can be put out to the entire CCIM community. Affinity provider discounts, best-in-class branding. There's CCIM Connect for communicating with people who have similar interests as you do in terms of the investments and so forth. CCIM 50. So this year, CCIM celebrated their 50th year as an organization. This initiative sets a goal of raising the involvement of the underrepresented groups in commercial real estate through a variety of programs. There's a cultural diversity education program providing scholarships. There is the Vets in Real Estate program, so those who have served our country can come back and get, for very little or no cost, a full CCIM education and earn the designation. There's a Young Professionals program that we're finally getting up and rolling. And just this year, I was actually appointed to chair the Presidential Advisory Group on Diversity, which will be looking at the need for gender inclusion, diversity in terms of race and in terms of age. So all that said, what's in it for me? I took my test October 12th, 2011, with 300 plus brokers, including Ryan Embry, Jay Lyons, Peter May, and Kevin Reed, all from this chapter. My good friend, and, okay, follow closely here, my mom's childhood's best friend's brother, Bob Nelson, presented me with my pin. I knew it was a special day, but I truly could not imagine the positive and powerful impact it would have on my career. So let's take a minute to think about that date, October 2011. And forgive me, I'm going to sound like my Nana here, but things were a whole lot different then. Today, the checks are coming in closer together, they're bigger, and I think we all agree that life's looking pretty damn good. So who has the time to take the long courses that pull us out of the office and away from our revenue-generating activity? The market is hot. But that is precisely why getting the designation is more important than ever. Yes, there's a lot of business, but more and more brokers are entering our marketplace every day. How are you going to stand out? What's going to make you special? I might have gotten off course here a little bit. Go to that one. Experience, right? You survived. Your clients weren't decimated in the Great Recession. Experience is great, but a lot of people have experience. So what's in it for me? How does my CCIM designation benefit me? I've been giving that question a lot of thought. And in my oh so humble opinion, it boils down to two things. First, very importantly, CCIM is not for everyone. Not everyone should strive to be a CCIM, kind of like home ownership or a college degree. Not everyone should take on the responsibility and the financial commitment that comes with being a CCIM. It is cliche, but it is truly what you make of it. You can rush through your courses, be satisfied with simply passing the test, do the basics to get your portfolio accepted, take your final, put the pin on your lapel, and then go about business as usual. Let's see here. If you are pursuing the pin, to simply stick those 4 initials, little letters behind your name, and you're not going to back it up with ongoing action, and you think some fairy princess is, and I know some of you think I am, but I'm not, is going to make it rain deals, then save your time and save your money. Being a CCIM is about commitment to representing the industry with knowledge and integrity, and constantly striving to be that much better than you were the day before, to give your clients the absolute best service and advice. So yes, not every commercial broker should pursue the pin. My second thought was that a CCIM designation creates confidence. The confidence to calculate, and perhaps more importantly, the confidence to communicate financial analysis. It's one thing to be able to say that the NPV of the investment is $1 million, the IRR is 10.5%, because that's what your HP 10B2 spit out. But it's another to be able to present that information in a comprehensive fashion, relate it to your client's goals, and then use that information to explain why this is an amazing opportunity, or even more importantly, that there are better alternative investments to be had. How many business owners meet with a broker, and after they're done explaining their tenant requirements, the broker asks questions like, would you like me to evaluate leasing versus buying? Or asking the business who owns their real estate, have you considered a sale leaseback? The confidence gained in earning your designation, the understanding that there are creative and analytical solutions to be considered, this is what sets you apart and creates real value for your clients. This is what it means to be a CCIM. That's it.
You can tell we're a technologically focused organization. Yeah, that's right. Actually, Craig is operating remote. He's in charge of this, so. Okay, we are on to transaction of the year. And first, did I not get that going? Is this maths? So let's start off with lease of the year. So we separate our transactions of the year into sale transaction of the year or joint venture transaction of the year and lease transaction of the year. And this year we had one lease submission that was head and shoulders above all the other lease submissions that we had. It was head and shoulders above because it was the only lease submission we had. But that doesn't mean that is any less worthy. This was a very impressive lease that Matthew put together. He represented a nonprofit church, and in his application, the very top of it, he said, I represented a church, in parentheses, not my church. This may be the biggest deal point of all when we get into there. How do you get business going to somebody else's church and having them come to you? He came into a situation where the church had been acting on their own behalf in lease negotiations with an Advanced Auto Parts. It was a legacy deal that the auto parts dealer was in part of their building, and they were between a rock and a hard place. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't have the skill set Matthew has. And unfortunately, Advanced Auto Parts did have the skill set. And they really tried to stick it to this organization. And Matthew came in late, got the hot potato, he went in and he engaged with Advanced Auto Parts, and he figured them out. So his communication skills, trying to figure this stuff out as far as how Advanced Auto Parts was looking at their space, is the key to one of the big keys to this transaction. So these guys were looking for these guys. The church didn't have any money. They're looking for no TI costs. They don't want to put in an ADA bathroom, and they can't lose their tenant. So what do? We stick Matthew in 4 months late, and he engages with Advanced Auto Parts. He comes up with a data-driven approach. He figures out their business model, and he does the research. He uses his CCIM skill set to figure out what the office rate is, figure out what the retail rate is, and hardball them. So I have to say, if Matthew would give permission, I would recommend reading his case study, because this thing is amazing. It is probably one of the better lease negotiation stories I've heard in quite a while. So Matthew, would you come up and talk a little bit about this? I'm butchering your story for you.
Great job. Thank you for your kind words, Carson. Matthew Conser, CCIM. Well, this is one of those deals where truly was a hot potato. I'd actually avoided the phone calls for a number of months. I didn't want to do this deal. I'd met with this church, which I don't attend. It's actually my sister's church, and she told them to call me. And so, 3 or 4 years ago, I went and looked at their building, and they wanted to buy it or look for another space, and I looked around, and there just really wasn't options for them with the parking and the size of the congregation, the conferences they hold. And they mentioned to me, hey, we have the opportunity to buy this building on a contract. I said, well, you should do that. And we don't need you involved in the negotiation. That's fine. I said, and the reason you should do that is you have a CarQuest as a major tenant, and that will pay your mortgage. However, you've got need a new roof and you need new HVAC. I brought all these other professionals in to take a look at all this stuff before they engaged in that negotiation. They bought the building on a contract, real soft terms. 2 years later, they call me back and say, hey, the lease is expiring, tenant's in a holdover period. CarQuest is bought by Advanced Auto. The guy who contacted me was actually a retired real estate attorney, and he was done negotiating with their leasing group. They'd worked on it for 4 months. They'd lowballed them. They'd offered $4,000 to $5,000 a month for 17,000 square feet. Unfortunately, it was a dated space, and there were options in the marketplace. They could go down the street. They could go to the mall behind it. And so they asked me to come in, and I avoided these calls because I kind of knew their circumstance. I'd seen the requests from Advanced Auto on the internet, on the various platforms I engage with, that, hey, these guys are out looking. How am I going to keep these guys? And so I went and met with their board, and they said, well, we really want to keep the tenant, so don't lose the tenant. We'd really like to get to $12,500 a month, if at all possible, because I'd encourage them to get an appraisal before they bought the building and find out what lease rates might be and what they should be paying for the building. They did that. They wanted to be about $6-8 a square foot. And they didn't have any money for TIs. The building was aged, so we knew there'd probably be some ADA compliance issues. We knew that upstairs was at least a 3,000 square foot mezzanine space. If we lost the tenant, we're going to have to put an elevator in. And oh, by the way, we don't have any money to pay you for a commission. So that wasn't the reason I was not interested in the transaction particularly. It was the fact that here's a hot potato. If I can't negotiate with these guys and get them to the finish line, their primary source of passive income goes away, their ability to service their debt goes away, and my sister will kill me. And so I went about trying to determine what their business model was, because they had an industrial machine shop there, which you can't do in the zone that they're currently in. They had a warehouse for parts, and they had a retail, all in this one location. And I know the zoning code enough that you can't do those in this particular zone where they're at unless it's grandfathered. So I kind of knew that they'd have to separate those businesses, lose that synergy, and that was part of my discussion with the leasing group is, look, if you're going to go anywhere in Albany, you're going to have to separate these business parts and lose that synergy. It'd probably hire more managers, probably hire more staff, and it's not going to fly. I don't think anybody can deliver you a space as good as we can for the dollars, but let's talk about what rates are. And I just done a state office lease, and so I was very familiar with leasing comps for office. So I laid out a lengthy email. The attorney who works, the retired attorney that worked for the church, gave me one of the ultimate compliments. He says, you went through this negotiation as if you were an elder statesman. And I really appreciated that because I was very careful in the words I put in my emails. Interestingly, I never talked to the leasing group on the telephone. It was all conducted via email, lengthy emails. And I don't know if Carson mentioned to you, at that point in time, I'd injured my back, so I spent 2 months in my living room on a futon doing most of these emails on my phone. So it was a little bit of a challenge personally, but my back's all great, everything's fine. And the day I got back to the office after surgery, after 2 weeks further recuperation, I went back to the office and recorded the memorandum of lease for this transaction, which Advanced Auto says, we don't do a memorandum of lease. We've never done it nationwide. I said, look, this is a requirement for the tenant, and the benefit to the landlord. The benefit to the landlord is now they have a financeable product. They have a memorandum. So, it was really, I think the best byproduct of the whole transaction was that they'd been lowballed, and in our negotiation, they wanted to start a new lease in July. I got them to start 4 months early. Basically, got an extra $50,000 for the church. They wanted to pay $4,000 to $5,000 a month. I got them to $14,500 on day one, about 3 times what they were expecting to pay. And my client was interested in doing a 5-year lease, and I said, let me show you the benefit of compounding and why you want to do a 10-year deal. First of all, the cap rate, for those of you who understand, the cap rate goes down probably a point in today's marketplace as far as value goes, just from the security and the longevity and stability. So I showed them the value of compounding, and they said, gosh, let's do a 10-year deal. So we negotiated to do a 10-year deal. Tenant wanted a flat lease. We got 2% bumps in the lease. All in all, it was a really challenging hot potato. It was one of those deals where midway I'm going, God, why did I take this assignment on? I was resistant to doing it, and here I'm doing it. So nonetheless, a great challenge, great resume builder, and I was able to do the right thing. In the end, they didn't have the money to pay me, so I even financed their commission. So as they collect rent payments, they pay me X amount of dollars on a monthly basis for the next 10 years. So worked out fine for everybody. So there you go. Is that enough? Thank you. Wow, awesome.
We have something to commemorate your work.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Oh, here, we need
Come
a
here,
photo
buddy.
of you. We need
Come
a
over
photo.
here. Come over here. Thank you.
So if you're bringing in a buyer to lease a space, avoid Matt's spaces. Okay. The next group we have up is for transaction of the year for sales. So the hardest working man in real estate is Matthew Concert because he is all over the place. So this one, he has a propensity for working with nonprofits again. This was a property down in Corvallis, Oregon. Old building, old zoning. It was run by the Habitat for Humanities, and these guys were looking for liquidity to go and do what they do best, which is to build affordable housing. And Matthew, in 2011, first started working on this project. This guy is amazing. So in 2011, he starts working on the project. He puts on his developer hat, he puts on his broker hat, and he says, how can we get a little bit of liquidity for you guys to do what you can do? And he's looking at the space, and he decides, oh, let's go down to the city and talk to them. The city says, okay, we want you to do the most expensive and most convoluted process possible. Let's do a a comprehensive plan amendment, which, if any of you guys have dealt with cities, this is a terrible move. So at that point, Matt says, no thanks, I think there's a better way. We can just do a lot line adjustment, and we can try and rezone this thing. So what hurdles does he overcome? He has a client again with no money, not much of a skill set for developing, and so Matt goes through and he puts together a deal with a LIHTC developer, low-income housing tax credit developer, and he says, okay, we can use this portion of the property, but you guys pay for all the third-party reports, you get this thing subdivided, and you can build housing on it. Well, they go down this process for a couple of years, and lo and behold, they do all the work, everything's ready to go. They do not get their tax credit funding. And they didn't get their tax credit funding because the state miscalculated the points to score their application. So they should have gotten their tax credit funding, and Matt again is left holding the bag. So not deterred, Matt says, okay, where there's a will, there's a way. He scrounges up an AutoCAD file, does a last-minute lot line adjustment for them, and finds a way to sell this off to a retail developer. At the very end, if you're not doing the right thing to get a deal done, your client's attorney will definitely attempt to kill this thing. So on the last day, their attorney required an appraisal, a one-day appraisal, which is very feasible. So Matt used one of his best negotiating tactics, which is the scorched earth policy. He explained to them in very clear terms, you're very secure, it's a low loan to value, you have income coming off of your note, let's not screw up a good thing because we'll pay it off and say goodbye to you. 10 days later, Matthew has a subdivided lot that is sold off to a retail developer and I believe is now being developed. So this is an amazing, amazing property. So the next one is Brian Resendez. Brian is a hotel broker and he takes on only tough properties. He engages with a seller who is well over market. He wants to be 55% above what the market comps show for this property. It has a hot spring, so it's got intangible features that he needs to represent to the marketplace. He takes 3 to 4 months going back and forth with the seller, trying to get them to understand the comps, trying to get to a marketing package that is acceptable. I mean, this is really basic stuff. And he takes the time to educate his seller. After taking it to market at an unreasonable price, they bring it back out at $18.9 million. Brian puts it into contract with a buyer at $15.5 million. They reconfigure the site. They have to do a lot line adjustment post-closing. So Brian's able to somehow negotiate post-closing lot line adjustments. They had to go through a rezoning, and then they had to make sure that they complied with all of the county requirements. They lost permits because this process took so long. So, Brian, to get this deal done, you kind of moved heaven and earth. This is the biggest, I think this is the biggest transaction of your career. It's the biggest, so far. The highest price per door, and the biggest acreage sold. So this is quite an impressive feat to get this done. The next one, Pat Keskard and Brent McLean. You guys also take on tough properties. Taking on an old mill site is not for the faint of heart. And taking on an old mill site that's an REO is even more dangerous. So Pat represented the seller in this transaction. Brent represented the buyer. It was a trucking company. They wanted to repurpose the site for their trucking site. And initially the due diligence looked like it was pretty short. And then you figured out that there was about 38 conditions, if I remember correctly, that you had to fulfill with your land use attorney once you dug in. This is a high-low negotiating point that's going on, 42 or 38 terms. And they dug up a whole bunch of conditions that were pretty unusual. Of the permits they had to fulfill, they had to get a Willamette Greenway permit. And I Googled it, and I still have no idea what it is. There you go. And at the same time, you had to get an abandoned, diminished mill site recognition from Lane County. Still have no idea what that is as well. But you guys persevered on this one. The county tried to retrade you at the last minute and require a traffic study when they hadn't requested it up front. You guys were on your game, communicating with your attorney, saying, hey, if that's not part of the criteria up front, it's not going to be part of the criteria later. Among other things, your bank, Pat, was purchased twice during this transaction. And if any of you have dealt with an REO department in a bank, they have to take it to their committee. Now, if your committee consistently changes, I don't know how you do this. So we did that, and Brent, again, had trouble with bankers. Maybe we should work with some more CCIM bankers. I'm just throwing this out there. His banker was fired at the last minute. He did not submit his loan package 10 days before closing. And thankfully, Brett has a very sophisticated buyer that after going through all this hassle said, it's okay, I'm going to pay cash for it. And I think he's probably working with a new banker now. So this is another really impressive transaction that I learned an awful lot from. Nothing more than you guys are tough SOBs. So congratulations, this is a phenomenal transaction. And last but not least, we have the esteemed Bob Nelson. Bob is a staple of our chapter, and I think he has taught more people about deal structure than anybody in our chapter. It doesn't hurt that he's been practicing real estate for 49 years. And I think he uses every year to get this transaction that we're presenting done. So Bob, being a gregarious gentleman, is chatty with his printer repairman, who ends up owning a 146-unit mobile home park that he basically owns free and clear. So as they begin chatting, Bob finds out that, oh, they've received an offer on it. They've gotten an appraisal at $7 million. They get an unsolicited offer at $8 million. He says, not enough, that's not so great. Well, after talking to Bob, apparently they get an unsolicited offer at $10.3 million, which represents a 4 cap. Again, I guess free advice sometimes is worth more than you pay for it. But Bob is now in a role of trustworthy advisor by telling them the right things to do and expecting no compensation for this. As they see Bob is very capable, he begins to educate them and says, hey, I will work with you. If you're going to sell this, we need to have a exchange action plan, which is capitalized, and I believe he is trademarked. So if you sit down with your clients and you describe your exchange program, please pay Bob a royalty. They decided to move from a 4 cap and evaluate what the family needed. And Bob has decided, hey, we're going to create safety of cash flow for the elder members, and we're going to create equity growth for the younger members. He also decided that proximity needs to be close to Eugene after counseling his members. Proximity needed to be close to Eugene, so they had to be able to drive to the property within 3 to 4 hours. And they decided they needed to finance it. And this is where Bob shines, because Bob, being gregarious, is also very close to our CCIM members. He partnered with Isaac Grant, and he introduced Isaac to this group of buyers, the entire family, and he set up a banquet with the executives of the bank. And to get them comfortable using debt, having a private event is probably about as good as it gets, because you know who is making your loan and who you're answering to. With that, the gentleman got comfortable. Bob went on a rampage searching for properties. He located one property in Redmond, Oregon, through another brokerage firm, Capital Pacific, and underwrote the property at, I believe it was a 7.3 cap. He is now moving from a 4 cap to a 7.3 cap. Bob is the expert of arbitrage. This is now levered up. Doing very well just on one, but one is not enough for Bob. He goes to a second property. He writes on the Opera House in Salem. I believe that was a 7.2 cap. I don't know if you didn't close on the Opera House, did you? No. So what does he do? He goes to the seller, he sees his name in bright gold letters and says, what else do you have for sale? Bob locates another property in Salem, an office building that he ends up closing at a 7.2 cap, I think it was, 7.2. So most normal men would be done, but Bob goes to Crescent City and locates a deal that's been on the market for 2 years and is represented by another broker, Jeff Elder, who's prolific down in Eugene as well. And thanks to Bob's relationship with Jeff, he says, hey, we're going to buy that center, but there's been a risk of this thing going dark in 2 months for the last 6 months. The leases were expiring. It's about to be half vacant. So Bob says, do whatever it takes and lease this thing up. So he bought that one. I believe it was a 7.15 cap, 7.1. Do you remember? Okay, 7.1 cap. So Bob is now traded out of a 4 cap asset and into a couple of 7 cap properties with debt that's financed at 4.25%, 30-year amortization. He's hit home runs for his clients. Fixed for 10 years. How he does this, only Bob can know. But he's set up a family. He has stabilized the elder generation's life, and the younger generation, he's got equity growth for him. So this was also an amazing transaction. You guys in this room are pretty lucky to have guys like Bob around and to learn from. I've learned a lot from Bob. I've learned a lot from Matt. I've learned a lot from Brian. I've learned a lot from Brent. Pat, you just keep running deals through, and every time you do something, it seems to have hair. Maybe those are the ones you present, but I learned from those too. So we have an amazing group of transactions of the year. So I'd like to see who wins this thing. The winner is Bob Nelson. Please come up, tell us more. Congratulations.
Will you go
Yeah,
over
here,
there to
let's-
the window thing?
Can you stand here to hide my belly?
With mine.
After listening to the rest of them, I'm not sure how I made it. Wow, you did some amazing transactions. I was particularly pleased with this transaction. In fact, I would have to say it was one of the best that I've ever done. I've been at it for 49 and a half years. This one, like he stated, I had a copy repairman. We've got like 4 copy machines doing various things, trying to get them all integrated, and they did send out a young gentleman who seemed to have a knack for things. And this has been going on for maybe a couple of years, and he'd like to talk real estate. And he said, I want to invest in commercial real estate. So I didn't think much, because I'm thinking, well, I'm not sure what you're making as a copy repairman, but I'm not going to speak down, but anytime he wanted to talk, let's talk. And then he said, well, my family has a mobile home park. Oh, that's interesting. And I didn't pursue it much further. And like they stated, they had an initial offer an initial MAI appraisal several years ago, and I think it was $7.1 million. And then they said, well, we're considering maybe doing something with it. And I said, that's interesting. And he came back like a week later. He says, well, we have an unsolicited offer. I said, oh, that's great. Tell me about it. He says, well, it's $10 million. I said, $10 million on a property that's recently appraised at 7? I didn't have numbers or statistics and so forth, so I didn't want to be too bold here. And I indicated, if that's really the case, slow down your process substantially while lacing up your kids and cinching down your stampede string, race to escrow while being reluctant and saying, I don't want to close until the end of the week. And that's it. So interestingly enough, this person went dark as it was going. And they had a 60-day due diligence period, and they'd started to talk to me about, would you consider a tax-deferred exchange, engineering the thing? And I said, sure, I would consider that. I need to meet with the family members. And it turns out that he was the son-in-law. His father-in-law was married to one half of the partnership, and his wife was the sister of the brother that was the other half. They were in their, I would say, let me think, I'm 75, so that made them probably, I'd guess, 70. Interestingly enough, they didn't speak too well with each other initially. One wanted to take the money and run, and the other says we need to do a tax-deferred exchange and think of what we could do if we were to do this properly and set up both wings of the family with a recurring income stream. It would be a pretty interesting process. Well, finally, A and B came together, but in the process, the current transaction went dark. And at the 59th day, I said, hey, you got to anticipate problems, because if they're not communicating back again, they're probably going to pull out of the deal. And he says, that's okay. He says, it's okay if they do, because we have two more offers. One is at $10.3 million. And sure enough, the first one went dark, and it was a monster buyer out of Southern California. Whose name will not be necessarily disclosed. I would assume they probably had an exchange set up, and this was one of the properties that they were trying to line up in advance. So the second offer came in, and he says, well, I said, attempt to identify who is this person. He says, well, they're very familiar with the park. That's fine. Familiarize yourself with who they are. And I'd researched just a little bit off of the net. It was a monster. And I indicated in this instance, they've offered $100,000 in earnest money. I said, why don't you go back with a simple statement that you just got left at the altar with another offer of $100,000 earnest money. Let's ask for $200,000 and make it non-refundable at the beginning. And I said, now, I need to tell you, that's probably going to kill the deal, but here's the strategy. You'll race back about 3 days later and say, gosh, what's the problem? And then agree to go with the normal due diligence period where earnest money doesn't go hard until you've done a certain amount of research. The guy took the $200,000 non-refundable. I thought, wait a minute, we're leaving money on the table someplace. This is becoming too easy. And everything I had suggested or counseled, coached, whatever you want to call it, was happening. And it was like, gee, this is really interesting. It normally doesn't happen like this. So I said, okay, then shorten up the due diligence period, because we've got all the due diligence documents. And I said, now, I would suggest that if they've been talking to you, if you include me in the transaction, I need to start from scratch, and they're probably not going to like that. So why don't I just deal with the up leg? I'll counsel you on the down leg. The down leg is the property you're getting rid of. The up leg are the property or properties that you're going to go into. And they said, okay, that's fine. So I didn't charge anything on the down leg transaction. There was, I think, a Southern California broker that had brought the thing in, so that's fine. Just stay out of the way and let the transaction happen. Allow greed to take its course, and everything should go just fine. And everything went fine. And about that time, I discovered that we had two wings, two generations of the family. The gentleman who had approached me says, you ought to be able to take the $8.3 million net equity. They had a line of credit that was hung on this thing, which they had an artful way of dealing with. That I guess it was 8.5 that I had to deal with. He says, you should be able to take that into 25, 30, maybe $35 million in property. I said, that would be possible, but with the first recession, you'll probably get knocked off the perch. You don't necessarily want to do that. You want to be the second generation that becomes the first generation or the senior generation in time and actually have something to show for it. So part of the process was to rein him back. Now, you do understand the only reason I was in the game was because of him. So about the time that you start becoming contrary to your client, that's not a good idea. But nonetheless, and then speaking to the older generation, they didn't really want to take on debt. They didn't want to have any risk and so forth and so on. So one side says do an $8.5 million deal. The other side says 35 million would be just fine. And at that point, who am I listening to? So I had to bring the whole group together in a kind of a joint series of counseling sessions with here's the risks, here's the rewards to each of them. and to a point where the older generation said, okay, we understand what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a family trust, for lack of and I'm not using the term trust properly, a family joint venture that everybody's going to win. So we're going to go from a 4-cap property, and if it's free and clear, your cap rate, I think, is 4%, the last I checked, into something that will be much bigger than that. So everybody's going to win across the board. They said, well, do you think you can do this? And about that time, the buyers started to step up their process, so it was now starting to become a little closer to closing. At the same time, they wanted to make offers all over the place, and I went to Boise, Idaho, and with several CCIM members that I had dealt with at the CCIM Institute level. As Andy had mentioned, meet people, so forth. I was on a first-name basis and so forth there. As it turned out, also my college roommate for about 1.5 years, and the reason he was, I'm being filmed, right? Jeez, this stuff gets out. He's going to nuke me. The only reason he was going to school is because his dad would buy him a new Cadillac each year. So between whatever, he was, I'm sure, a fine student. So the long and the short of it, he inherited this dynasty, which was interesting. They provided a certain product to somebody else from Europe, and they melded chocolate with milk and created, I think it was a thing called something like Nestle's, or I can't remember exactly what. Anyway, the long and the short of it, he turned out to be an extremely astute investor. He owns 1 square mile of land in Boise with all of the buildings that he built on it. Huge, huge, huge dynasty. So the long and the short of it, he also counseled us with, you don't want to be here, you don't want to do this, you don't want to do that, here's what's happening, and so forth, which was just tremendous. I mean, you couldn't have bought better counsel. I set that thing up, walked in, and it was an old-time meeting and so forth, and then we went to lunch. By the end of that, we'd figured out we really didn't want to do what they wanted to do in Boise. So then it came down to, what do we want to do? Well, this person's going to manage the dynasty, this person's going to do such and so forth. So I had the good fortune of discovering a really nice boutique shopping center in Redmond. It has a Starbucks, it has a McDonald's. What else do you need to attract attention? There it is. And all, 8 years old, 10 years old, and so forth. A person interested in selling it because he had other things he wanted to do, a major investor out of Bend, Don Bohofer, some of you may know him, so forth. Anyway, we negotiated price and terms, and all the way through, I'm kind of watching for whatever could go wrong, because this was a kingpin transaction. If I bought something at $12.5 million, I only have to beat the $10 million gross sale price in order to defer the complete tax-deferred exchange. The tax consequence that I was dealing with was $3.7 million. If I screwed it up, it cost them $3.7 million in English terms, common terms, and that was not a positive sensation. So if I could nail something down that was large enough that I could defer all of the gain into that property, then the only question was, are we bringing in the full $8.5 million, or do we then start to lever? Unfortunately, one of the power partners, Isaac Grant, an extremely creative individual, stated, you know, our credit union is going through some changes in policy, and we would like to go long-term real estate. I said, I've got something you could cut your teeth on. I need to borrow, and I think it was like $8.5 million, but I want it fixed interest rate, and I want it long-term, and I don't want to call at the end of 10. And he says, okay, what else? I thought, oh, man. Now, Isaac's not here to defend himself, but it's interesting. They will go fixed for 10, and then if you need another 5 at the end, they'll give you 5, but you have to have a one-time mark to market, and then that would be fixed for 5 years. So restated, we're alive for 15 years regardless of what happens. If the bottom blows out and interest rates go to 29%, I'm at 4.25% fixed for a 10-year period. Now, at the end of the 10th, it's going to be tacky if the interest rates go berserk. But if we haven't figured out how to duck a bullet between here and the end of the 10th year, we have bad real estate counsel. I'm checking my lifeline. I think it's good for 10. Anyway, so that started to become the real interesting process. And with that loan, there is no prepayment penalty. No prepayment penalty, no yield maintenance. The only problem is if you walk down the street and finance with a competitor, they've got a 54321 prepayment penalty. I can live with that. And now I've set them to no exposure to capital cost, and I've set them in a position where they got a huge cash-on-cash return. The only question is, how much do you want to borrow? He says, well, I'll remain flexible till closing. So if you only want to borrow $2 million, fine. You want to borrow $8 million, fine. Okay, now I got the free hand to go out and find the other properties. And fortunately, we found one that it was a Capital Pacific asset, but it didn't fit our style for several reasons. We had several visits of the property, good owner, so forth. We just opted not to do that. But on the way back to my car, I happened to notice this owner's name in gold on a building 1 block away. And I looked at that and I thought, that must be one of the properties that he says that he owns. I immediately called my guys and said, turn around. They're heading back towards Eugene. I said, turn around. You need to look at what you're going to buy. And they did, and it's like, we could own that? Yep, pretty sure we could. So then I started the negotiation process, and he was not represented by a broker on that. And I said, you want to bring in a broker? He says, no, that's fine. You and I will talk and so forth. I said, I'm going to ask you to pay a brokerage fee at the end. You got to understand, I'll make it roughly half of a brokerage fee. If that's an acceptable process, that's fair. So we negotiated price and terms, and it's an 11-story office building downtown Salem. It's on the historic registry and so forth. Everything's good. In the process, I was concerned with the environmental, and talking to Jim Brown, who's an attorney that is a power partner here, environmental laws especially, I called and I said, hey Jim, let me ask you a quick question. How foolish would I be if I didn't do a phase 1 on a property that had one recently, etc.? He says, repeat that if you would, please. And he says, how foolish? He says, absolutely foolish. I said, okay, fine. I will then call Maul Foster and arrange for that. They said, gosh, we're out of ways. I said, well, I need to know within 2.5 weeks if this is a good property to buy. I don't want to go into a situation where we've got environmental issues that are going to be discovered later. They delivered a complete phase 1 in a 2-week period. So everything, they dropped what they needed to drop. They said, if you're a chapter partner, we will make this happen. And it was an extremely detailed report. It was excellent. It covered the lender. Everything was cool. And then as we went on to the 11th story, I said, okay, now we got another one I need to have you do. They came back shortly stating, it's interesting, you've had a dry cleaner in that building for at least 25 years. And about that time, my athletic supporters dragging. No, I shouldn't say that. Especially, you're not taping really, are you? Anyway, so we had that, plus they thought there were 2 tanks buried and so forth. So I said, well, we need to have the full-blown deal. They did it, and they ran a magnetometer or whatever over the ground. They said, no, the tanks have been removed. But I didn't want to bank on what the seller was saying because an older gentleman, and he didn't own the property for the last 50 or 60 years. This thing was a 1927 building. So, I mean, it was old. And for the dry cleaner, we knew exactly where it was, and we had them drill a series of holes, came up absolutely clean. Yeah, my wife is saying I've talked too long. Okay, I'll button it up. The third property, and again, Isaac looked at it and said, hey, we can do that. That's not a problem. Same terms, same interest rate, everything. And so I knew that I had a certain amount of money left that it would afford me about a $5 million asset. And everybody agreed, yeah, spend it all, let's go. So I found a property that had been on the market for, 2 years, 2.5 years, somewhere in Eugene. You mentioned Crescent City. It's actually Crescent Avenue, right out in the, very, very active business area in Eugene, first exit off the freeway and so forth. Anyway, the long and the short of it, We made an offer that was something like $800,000 below the asking price, and they said there's no way in the world. I said not a problem, and then waited, and it took 3.5 days to receive the phone call with what was the offer again, and I said, well, it's here. Well, if you'd come up to here, I might be able to represent the thing. And so we came up close to that number, not quite there, and back and forth and back. And finally I said, we're closing the deal. I like to close things in the 45-day period. All of this has been done in the 45-day period. And I thought, you know, I've got a fully tax-deferred exchange. I've got cash flow that's tremendous. I've got a rate of return. I don't do any 10-year projections. I just measure things on what it's going to do the first year and a projection for several years, and that's about it. Anyway, it all closed. It all went together. Ryan had an outstanding property. We couldn't, you know what killed our transaction? 26 beavers. These are not Oregon State graduates. These are actual, real, live beavers that had blocked up a waterway and covered part of a parking lot. That's, okay, my wife is saying go bye. Oh, wait a minute, hold it, yes, stop. Okay, the power partners that helped, Jim Brown, attorney, Mal Foster Alonge, let me think, Tycor, Cheryl, Bobby Artis closed part of it, Bobby Wave. Okay, thank you. And did an outstanding job. Came to Eugene so that my clients could close in a hometown environment. I'm missing Isaac Grant, but there's more.
You gotta do some cost seg on that, Bob.
Yeah, Jonathan, yeah, right. Anyway, it was a real pleasure dealing, I tell you, I tried the power partners, and it is absolutely amazing the product that they have to offer. And I would really recommend pay attention to the power partners. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, right.
And I got to tell you one last thing. This,
There's a 12-step program, Bob, for that.
one of my clients, the father-in-law, it turns out, is a pastor. I wasn't aware of that initially. Now, you'll never hear me say anything blasphemous, but you might hear potty mouth a bit on occasion. Brent's ducking. Yeah. Anyway, or see some of the emails. Again, yeah, I've got to tell you, I was not good enough to do this transaction. I have no idea how every time I did something, it worked. It was the most amazing transaction I have done. Everything I tried worked. I was guided by an invisible hand. You call it whatever you want. I got a sense of what it was. And I think John Sutton had a lot to do with that.
Wait, oh, did I go backwards? Oh. Ta-da! Okay, scholarship recognition. That's what I was trying to get to. So every year we provide a scholarship. I think starting next year we're doing 2. That's kind of fun. For core curriculum classes through CCIM. And we had a number of applicants. We basically look at the commitment to pursuing the designation, the commitment to the chapter, and a few other things. I'm going to just kind of keep this tight. So the winner of this year's scholarship, I'm very proud to say, because I know that he is going to be getting his designation soon after using this scholarship, is not me. I did not. Thank you. Okay, I guess we're not. I guess you don't get a slide. Ian Levin. Fancy little award.
Thank you.
That's your check. Don't lose it.
Okay, I got a file for those.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on from here, I have some slides, but we're not going to bother with them because it's not all that important. So this is my last meeting. I started out this year not being able to attend my first meeting because of, I don't know, roughly 60 inches of snow dumping overnight in Bend, Oregon, and elsewhere. It was a challenge to get here. And I actually thought last night that I might not be here today because my daughter thought she broke her arm. And so it was not broken. Everything's fine. She's well taken care of. But I'm glad to be able to end my term here at the meeting. So what I want to close with is just a little bit of information about what we've done this year, and I think it's important to understand. First of all, I think I'd like to share our core mission that we have, and that is simply to provide quality education programs, networking opportunities, and technology products to its members, as well as promote the merits of the CCIM designation to prospective members and the business community at large. So that is the core mission of our chapter. It is in line with the core mission of the Institute. Our keystone goal, what we are really trying to focus on this year is to elevate the CCIM brand regionally, to create awareness of the outstanding educational and networking opportunities of the organization, as well as reflect the exceptional expertise provided by CCIM designees. So when we do our strategic planning, it's a rolling 3-year plan. So this is something that when Matthew was president, he really got us focused on this idea that, you know, that the plan continues to evolve itself and continues to move us from as the leadership moves through. And so, you know, as you might be aware, the leadership, we have the board, and then within the board, we have 3 members who are basically in line to either our president or to become president. So next year, Mark Ilsley, who is the president-elect, will become the president. Mike Gallegos will be the president-elect, and then Jack Chu will be the first vice president. And so we hope with this continuity between leadership terms that we continue forging on a strategic path, hence the strategic plan, and have and to strengthen our chapter. So within that, we set a series of action plans, and I'm just going to touch on them quickly and talk a little bit about where we either did very well at that or it's something that we'll need to continue to focus on in the coming years. So one of the first action plans that we made was to revamp the marketing meetings, to encourage well-presented deal opportunities, the integration of the power partners and affiliates, utilizing them to help solve problems, and to gain a reputation as a place to gather valuable and relevant information. One of the things towards that end, to that end, was to try and initiate some more interest from the Portland community, from the brokers in the Portland community, and we started doing that by starting our 10:30 marketing meetings with some information about the Portland market, and then focusing on the Portland properties first, since they're closest. Those of us coming in from the nether regions of the state, if we rolled in a little late, we weren't missing something from our immediate area, and so forth. We're getting there. We think that it took us a little while to kind of figure out how that was working. Beth DuPont was the membership chair this year, and she did an excellent job of kind of continuing to figure out who we could bring in and helping that program along. So we're going to continue that. The second action plan we had was to continue to grow the chapter with the objective of creating a diverse group of members to create a deep network of information and experiences. So this is not only the broker members, but also the affiliates. And so we looked at our power partners and the affiliates that are joining us and trying to figure out where are our gaps. As an example, we don't have any CPAs that attend on a regular basis. So if you have someone who is involved in that industry, in that profession, and you think they might benefit, then, you know, let's help bring them in. So we're going to continue to fill in those gaps so that we have a really well-rounded network for all of us to draw on to make our businesses better. Our third point was to encourage committee participation and conference attendance to create a deeper understanding of the organization and general long-term commitment of the chapter and the Institute. And we had excellent committee participation, and we're going to continue to grow that. We really wanted to go off the idea that if everybody contributes a little, then we get a lot done, and that has been working out. The other piece of that, the conference attendance. So we have our Bend conference, but more specifically to the Institute, we have governance meetings twice a year in April and October. Those are the two time periods that we have candidates sitting for their designation and receiving their PIN. These are the conferences that our chapter historically has not attended. Generally speaking, we send from the board, we send usually 2, sometimes 3 board members, usually the president, president-elect, and first vice president. And what I have found in my time in going through that process and making the commitment to attend and be away from my business is that the Institute is a wealth of business opportunities. So if you are, and you know, some of you are in the marketing meeting, I talked about a transaction I did in Charleston, South Carolina. It's not about the fact whether you want to do business in Charleston or anywhere else. It's that network and those development of those relationships. Just like when you're in the chapter, you can't come to 1 or 2 meetings and go, oh, I can't get any business out of there. There's, it's never going to happen. It's a layering process, and it's a continuation of making sure that you are working those relationships, just like you work your relationships with your prospects to become clients. And the amount of referrals that I get from the chapter and from the Institute is correlated directly to the time commitment that I have made to that. And it's more, honestly, it's more than I can handle. It sounds like a ridiculous thing to say. Thank God I have a firm that I can turn these referrals over to, but it is true. It is there, and it's there to be had. So we're going to continue to work on that conference. If you're interested or you're curious about the conferences, come talk to me. I am more than happy to give you the rundown on what that looks like. I am involved in several committees at the Institute level. I'll be the regional vice president for our Region 1 in 2019, so I have a lot of commitment to that, and I think it's worth every minute that I have committed to it. We want to increase educational opportunities, and I think we've done an excellent start on this. Andrew really took the reins, and Andrew, are you still here? Where'd you go? Oh, there you go. And we all kind of, it was a little bit of the blind leading the blind. It had been a long time since we had done core curriculum. The Institute and how they process the classes and so forth was different. We didn't realize how much control they actually have. Poor Andrew got knocked around a couple times because we're like, no, you can't do that. No. And he's like, but I didn't know. And so he's been really a great sport about it. But one of the reasons we wanted to keep him on is because he did learn a lot. We learned a lot. And so we're going to bring another 2 core classes, 101 on February here in Portland on February 26th through March 1st, and 104 in Bend on May 21st through the 24th. And we're going to continue to do that. And this year, we're going to get into some of the non-core classes with some of the potentially some development or some of the other things. What was the one that crowdfunding. So we're working on those. This, we hope, will help to go towards getting more people involved in getting the designation and growing our chapter. We're working on a long-term marketing plan. That is definitely something we're going to continue to move forward with. The Institute has just committed a long-term has committed to a long-term planning of their marketing and PR, which is going to help bolster us at the chapter level. We wanted to understand the needs for the current applications of technology and what our membership needs. That is definitely a long and ongoing process. We'll reach we'll be working on. And then finally reaching out to colleges in the region that have commercial real estate programs to educate and promote the designation and what these groups are about. Some of you may not know we have a student membership now. It's a very nominal annual fee, and then we also give a discount on the lunch cost. So if you have or know of students at Portland State or University of Portland or even U of O, OSU, and they want to get here, Willamette, we have lots of colleges. So that's something that we've really been trying to move forward with and try and pull that younger generation into understanding not just what it is to be a commercial real estate broker, but what is it to be part of commercial real estate, whether it's cost segregation or lending or 1031 or whatever it might be, that there's a lot that we can offer. So this is what your board's been up to this last year, and we're going to continue that. I know Mark's going to do an excellent job. I said earlier I was a little concerned that Mark and Mike weren't here. We actually knew they couldn't be here. It's because of our date change. I'm pretty sure they'll be here in January, and I think that they'll do an excellent job of moving us forward. So with that, I want to quickly thank my committee chairs who did an exceptional job. Beth DuPont with membership, David Moore with programs. Yes. Andrew, as we talked about with education, Renee Nelson did awards. Jessica Beck headed up our events committee. Mike Gallegos did college outreach. Tom Ped, who has some challenges with our meeting times, but he's our new government affairs liaison. I ended up serving sort of begrudgingly on the government affairs committee for the Institute because I don't like politics. I don't get it. What I did learn is that what our government affairs committee does at the Institute level is so incredibly important to our livelihoods in this industry. And in learning that, I realized that it was really important for us as a chapter to have a liaison to continue to talk to the Institute and really make that as a powerful group as possible. And then finally, Kevin Reed, who headed up our Power Partners, and I really appreciate him. So next month, when we reconvene here, barring snowstorm number 2, we will be installing the new officers and then just having our regular meeting. We will have for those of you who weren't at the marketing meeting, we're going to have new slides that are fillable PDFs, not PowerPoints, for making your presentations. Should make it lots easier to prepare those and not have things moving around that you don't want to move around. And I think we're going to have a really great 2018, and I'm really looking forward to sitting during the whole meeting and having a lunch, which I still haven't had yet. So thank you very much for your commitment to our organization and to our chapter. I hope you have a very Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Merry Kwanzaa, I don't know, whatever else I'm forgetting. Be with your family, enjoy them, and have a Happy New Year.
Thanks, Andy.
So I get the best job in the world because this is going to be the Andy Edmonds roast. I have a few things to say about her. No, but on a serious note, every time I see Andy, I have such fond memories because both Andy and I got pinned by my friends and my mentors and my bosses at the time, Bob and Renee Nelson. Probably the coolest experience in my life. And so I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart because you've carried on the tradition of exceptional leadership for this organization. And Matthew created the foundation by all which we built this whole last 3 years on. And I know it's going to go into perpetuity. But Renee started the whole thing by showing us, and well, actually by beating on us and making sure that we donated and volunteered our time. She didn't ask us, she told us what we were going to be doing. So I thank Renee for doing that for us. But I think I'm so proud of this organization. I'm so proud to be part of it. But most of all, I'm proud of Andy. And I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your leadership, you've taken us to a whole new level. It's a wonderful organization, and it would never be this way if it wasn't for folks like yourself. So with saying that, I'd like to give you this. Recognition. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Oh, here it is right here. Congratulations, Madam President.